Hello everyone. I hope you are doing well and that you are enduring it all as best you can in the home. Welcome to Homemaking Radio, a place to listen to while you get something done at home. I do have a few things to show you today, so I don't want to delay you too much with visual things because this was designed to listen as you go about your daily business at home. And I hope they're not too shocked to see me after maybe over a month of not broadcasting. I've just had a house full and many things going on here at the manse. And I got a few moments away and created a little clean space over here so that I could talk to you because I started to miss coming here and discussing great things. A lot of people think that staying home and minding your own business isn't really much of a goal, but when you see how hard it is to do that, you realize that is a great accomplishment. It's a great accomplishment in self-management and self-control, and it's quite an achievement if you can do that. And so there's more to it than people think, and it does cost something of your life. It's self-control and sacrifice, and also you have to give up some things. And one of the things that you have to give up and to make you more qualified to even come here and listen is anxiety. We have discussed this a lot on these broadcasts, and how anxiety comes to us. We don't go out, hopefully don't go out seeking it. Now there are some ladies at home who feel guilty because they're not really worried about anything, don't have any great problems, so they go and try to find something to be concerned about or worried about. But we try not to chase down anxiety, and we try not to catch it. So today I have a few things I want to show you first. I want you mainly to listen, but I wanted to show some of the projects we had been doing. This has become a summer campsite for my descendants. I like it better this way. You don't have to leave home and go sleep on a bed that's not familiar, and you can have your own stuff around you. And we have a stock tank, so there's our swimming pool, and we tried to work with natural things. And so I think I'll start out with what the boys were doing. I got this at the dollar store. It's some kind of twine, very, very primitive twine. I wondered what all they would do with it. And it was pretty interesting to see. Well, first of all, the most instinctive thing would be a bow. Now, the arrows were always missing, so I couldn't find the arrow. But their mother found herself having to help them make an arrow with a notch in it and then also a tip. So she said, when I was growing up, I never thought I was supposed to know how to make these things, but she sure did do a lot of arrows, help the little ones with the arrows. And so they also made things for me. So I wanted to show you, first of all, how they looped this up and made a chain and made me a necklace. My goodness, that is what would you call that? A made for one necklace, privately made for me. And then a bracelet. And one of them made me a bracelet here out of this, so I can dress up and wear this. This was part of their summer camp project, and I didn't have these things planned. I just let them mess with it and see what they come up with. Bracelet, necklace. Okay, now there's something else. The youngest one, who's 5, made me a hair bow. Isn't that fantastic? So I'm going to put it in my hair pretty soon, but I have one more thing to show you. This is a ring, and I promised him I'd wear it, so I wore it to worship service. Not that I wanted to be noticed, but I sit in the back anyway and nobody notices me, but there's my ring. So he made me a ring for it, and I thought this was so clever to work with this. And I wanted to tell you something, because since this is a hair bow, I had it in my hair, and I thought maybe it would be the envy of all the royalty in the world once I showed it on here. But first, before I show you what it looks like in my hair, I was going to show you something about hair that I learned. We all have to learn from each other at these camps or resorts that we create in the manse. And one of the things I learned from my daughter, I try to tell her something, she tries to tell me something, and we all learn from each other. And goodness, I've lost it already here, so I'll just turn it on again. And it's called Protective Hairstyles for Hair Growth. Now, all of us have grown up with
Are you ready to learn?
With you know, having split ends, and some people say they can't. This is what the video looks like that she watched. And it was by a lady who has a sewing blog for costumes. So she was explaining how the Victorians and people before that took care of the ends of their hair. And they did not let their hair, the ends of their hair, show. They tucked them under. They rolled them under, and that protected the ends from all what the dryness and the splitting and the things that you have to buy so many products for. So I have been doing that, and she has been doing that, and it keeps the hair from falling out. It keeps you from shredding and shedding, and it keeps the ends from breaking. So I thought that was quite clever, and I will try to include that on the blog. If you want to see this video, please go over to the blog on which I have embedded it. I need to get my necklace back on. And you can see these things close up, plus I'll have a link for that video on how to take care of your hair. But here's one of the things this lady said that my daughter was sharing with me, and that is, before you brush your hair or comb it, she said first you finger comb it. You take your hair down and you run your fingers through it. And I don't know why I didn't know this, because a lot of this history was just kind of not exposed to us when we were younger. And my daughter had very tangly hair, and I didn't. We had products you could use like the rinses and tame and things like that, but I didn't think to do this. But you comb it with your fingers first. You get all the main knots out of it like this, and you treat it gently. And then when you're finished with that, you take a brush. This is one of those bamboo brushes that I like, and you start combing it at the end first, and then you work your way up. So I wanted to show you that before I put my fabulous bow out of this rope. And I don't want this is not jute rope, it's some other kind. Well, maybe it is. So I want to roll it back up and then put the bow in, and we'll see how that works. Got to wear this necklace though, because I promised him I would. So I'm all dressed up now, kids. So now the next thing that we did was I had a paper bag challenge I always do to see what people can make with paper bags, and they did do a number of interesting things, and they wanted to have a sword fight. So they made swords out of cardboard, and then they made the masks for fencing out of paper bags. I didn't bring it with me. And I made lists. I've got my to-do list, and I made it with this rope and with brown paper, and my shopping list. And this one's even more charming because the scissors were being used, and I had to tear it because I got lots of scissors, but everything was in use, so I tore it. So it's very charming. It's so much more primitive. And all I needed was a pair of scissors and a hole punch. Used to be, back in the olden days, this thing was hard to find, and you had to go to a special store to get them. Well, now they're selling them at the dollar stores, and they're the same thing. They're just as good a quality. And so a hole punch is nice to have, and a pair of scissors is all you need, or you can tear it. And this one is my blog broadcast content. So that's where I'm going to put my notes now. me see what else I have to show you. I got a pretty good review, and I got some reviews. I don't know if I read these to you or not, but there's a little tin in one of the guest rooms, and they leave reviews. So let me see what one of these reviews is for our summer camp. Let me see here. I loved the breakfast. I wish we could stay longer. Charming rustic with all the comforts of home. Lodgings fit for a queen. From Good King Humphrey. That's the name one of them uses. And let's see what this one says. Come to the manse, but only if you've been approved by the grandchildren. Great food, great entertainment, great lawn and fun in the pool and the sprinkler. Seasonal blackberries. Isn't it interesting about these blackberry vines? The ones that grow on the hedge bear blackberries, and we get lots of blackberries to make things with. But the ones that creep around the manse outside the house and climb up on the roof never bear a berry, and we're constantly fighting them back and clipping them. If Mr. S. ended up being here alone, and he was an old bachelor, I can just imagine him in a room with the blackberry vines coming up through the sink drain and through the windows and through the floorboards, just taking over. Very nice bedrooms. One small, one big, one medium. 7-star stories from the man of the house. Oh yes, Papa stays up late at night and makes up stories with him. And we did tell stories. And one of the things that we did was somebody could start the story. And I had one about a man named Mr. McAfee, and he lived alone. And he wrote stories because he wasn't in a place where he could be around people, and people were just too much trouble anyway, because then he'd have to go out. And so he just made up his own reality, and they enjoyed adding to this interesting man and the adventures that he had. 7-star stories from the man of the house. Polite cat that did not jump on the guests. The beds did not collapse. Ghosts did not bother. No Sasquatch, aliens, and nothing came into the house. So that was very nice. You know how it is, Sasquatch in Oregon. Everybody always talks about it. And let me see what else. Oh, you remember when I said I wanted them not to give me anything that couldn't be fit into an envelope? And I was thinking, oh yes, for my birthday it'll be the number of dollars of the years I am, the way I used to do them. Well, looky there. One of them did give me money. $200. Well, I know it was president, and I know which boy it was, because he's got his picture there, and it's the president. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend it on things that he makes that I can buy from him. And while he was here, he developed a tea business. Let me see if I've got them all here. I've got all the... Let's see if I've got all the reviews. Oh yes, there's more money here. And this was from somebody else. There's more money. So I'll be spending them on the things that they sell. And one of the things that one of the younger boys did was they developed a tea business while they were here. He was reading on one of the tea packages. I had tea stations all over where they could just take care of themselves, make their own. So he was reading what this sweet and spicy was in it. Cinnamon and ginger and various other things. So we ran out of these, and he went to my kitchen where I keep all the dry ingredients to make things with, and said, would it be okay if I used your cinnamon, your ginger, your nutmeg, and all that? And so I said sure, because I can get these at the dollar store for $1.25, or sometimes at grocery outlet for even less, 99 cents. So I can afford to use it. And he went into a tea business, and I didn't get to show you the box he made and all the tea bags he made. And he hired his mother to work for him, and they produced a box full of these teas. And this is from tea sacks that you can get at various places. Sometimes you can order them. I got these at a tea store, and they have you just open them up and you can fill it with something. And he has the cutest little tag he put on it, and it says cinnamon ginger right there. And so he made a whole lot of these and put them in his own box, which he made. I offered to let him have an empty tea box, but he didn't want it because he said it already had writing on it. He wanted to have his own brand and his own writing. So what I'll do is I will buy stuff from him. I'll buy tea from him with the money he gave me. I just hope he has change. And then we had a corrugated cardboard contest, which I'll tell you about later. I think I've shown you enough, and you probably need to get to work. And my daughter made a list of things we needed to do, and so we were going to have a summer activity, academy. We were going to have tea between all activities, music appreciation, and that would be anyone who could play anything, or they could even make their own instrument if they wanted to. Exercise and a nature walk. Mind-strengthening exercises, meaning we would look up words, and we'd learn to edify, and we would learn to discern. We'd look up those words and strengthen our mind. And then fatigue exercise, a speech lesson, how to make a sheet tent. And then she has atmospheric remediation. I asked her what that was. She says that's housekeeping, to get a good atmosphere. Grounding and water therapy. That means going barefoot on the grasses and going into the stock tank pool. And I'll give you a picture of that. I have been lounging in a float. Mr. S bought nice floats this year, and so that's probably what all I'll do for now, because I want to talk to you now. If you want to get to work, you can, about getting ready and making your list. And so I think it's very important to put away worry and anxiety just for a minute. Can you just think not of the world or what's happening to you or what's happening to all of us, just for a minute? Just give yourself a break. Intermittent rest and free from anxiety just for a minute once in a while. Just stop and think about something else. And we always like to start out our day at home with prayer. So if you have your children at home still, you have an opportunity to pass down something that will give you great reinforcement and strength later on. And it's to teach your children to pray for themselves, for their own character, their own success, for any emotional needs that they have, and to pray for each other in the family, including the mother, and because you're going to need their prayers one day. And we need to develop our future social life. You just can't trust everybody, and it's very important to have each other's support. So teach your children to pray. And I was reading about a lady online who had gone through some stress. I can't tell you how long ago that was. I was reading that, and I don't know where it is, and I'm sure there are plenty of stories like this, but this was a couple of years ago. And she just decided she was going to have to get out of this by herself, because it was before the days when there was any kind of awareness that this was going to be a problem. And so she decided she was going to have to get out of it. She'd read books, couldn't find anything that she needed, and she made herself do certain things 1 minute a day. So like she had a 5-minute program just to see, and just to make herself do it, and to do it almost religiously, on purpose. Whether or not it helped, she was going to try it. So she started out with prayer, and at first felt rather inadequate about that. And then she decided to go for a walk. And all she did, I think, was walk through her own house. And then she decided to sit in her rocking chair and just rock. And everything was 30 seconds or 1 minute. And then drink a cup of fine tea in the best teacup she could find on purpose, to also engage in some physical preparation, her bathing, her hair, her grooming, her dressing, to make it the best she possibly could. I'm sure that took more than 5 minutes or a minute, but then she participated in this tea and made her list of things to do. And she made herself a list: read one sentence out of something that's good. We used to call the Bible the good book, and I read a sentence out of this Greek English interlinear New Testament, because I wanted to see what the Greek was. I don't know how to pronounce it all, but I'll just read what it is in the English, and thought it was very good. It was just, you just have to read one sentence in a book aloud. And this is what I found, and I think you might like this. Blessed is the one who reads aloud the words of this prophecy, and blessed are those who hear it and who keep what is written in it. And you know, I looked up the word blessed too, because it, in the Old Testament, it means there are different words like blessing, bless, blessed, and they all have a different word. They aren't all the same word. But blessing in the New Testament is generally means happy, and many times in the Psalms, blessed means happy. So, blessed is the one who reads aloud the words of this prophecy, and blessed are those who hear it and who keep what is written in it. And there's something nice about reading something aloud. It does something quite different to your brain as to reading it silently. Both have their place, and both have a very, very good effect on you. And I like to read to other people. And so that's why I'm going to read to you today while you get something done. So then she had to also, she made herself do this. She just made up a list of any of the most benign things, the most whatever she could think of that she could try that would help her. Because back in those days, if I remember correctly, people would get panic attacks, which might have been just a precursor to what's going on today with so much stress. And she had to spend a certain amount of time breathing evenly, just sitting there breathing evenly. As a matter of fact, my oldest son came over one day, and I decided to do some of this with him. He's supposed to tell me something, and I'm supposed to tell him something. We were homeschooled, and we miss it, so we decided we'd have a redo, even though he's 48. And I just said, well, I miss talking to you. I miss all the discoveries that you made in life, and you would look at a word and observe something that I hadn't even noticed. And, as a young person, your mind was just swallowing up everything. He was so curious, and this was before the web was available, and there were many things we could not find out more about because there was not a book available, or we didn't know where to find the book. And so now we're finding out so much more. So and she had to make up a story and also to sing. And that's one thing my son and I did the day he came over. We decided, let's look through the hymn book and find a song we don't know, that we've never sung, and let's figure it out. So we picked away at it, and we learned a new song and sang it. And that's good for your mind. Also, we practiced walking, and I discussed the idea of walking and bending your toes as you walked. Our modern footwear does not really allow for that. It's more of a clomping, and that the toes had a lot to do with other parts of your body, and they can affect how things work in your body, your organs, everything else, and even your mind. So we practice walking and walking with bending our toes as we walked and putting our heel down and then the toes, just to see what that would be like. We're still in the experimental stage of everything, but I was admiring this lady that I had heard had made her own. Then she wrote in a little journal something she would like to have happen, or something that she would like to see, and then she drew a little picture. Now, I remember I always wanted a house, a Victorian style house. And so I started drawing pictures of Victorian houses, and then I would make up stories about the people who lived in them. And pretty soon I was so tired of the effort of writing and drawing that after a while I lost my ambition to have a house. But it's fun to draw them and paint them, and then you can have a different kind whenever it suits you. And so there was reading aloud, singing, making up a story, praying, and then there was something else called they call it mindfulness today. And it's being careful where you put your feet, where you put your things, what you're thinking, what room you're going to, just being mindful of everything so that you don't become forgetful. And there was a scripture that I had to back it up, and it was pay close attention to yourself. And so we tried to pay close attention. Where did I set my glasses down? Where did I set my keys down? Why am I leaving the room right now? What am I going to get? And just mindfulness. And a lot of this came from this woman who had looked after her mother, who had dementia, which I think eventually had developed into almost total forgetfulness. And she said that in taking care of her, she decided that she would pay more attention to everything she was doing and not walk through her home mindlessly without seeing things, noting things, and knowing that she's even walking. Many of us have so much on our mind as homemakers. We don't think much about what we're doing. We just know we're headed to the laundry room, or we're headed to do something, unload the dishwasher. And so mindfulness, you might want to do some research on that. Mindfulness is just being careful that we're present and that we can focus on something, and that we don't blank out and kind of go off into a daze. And there were many other things that she had listed for herself to do, was to make one home improvement of something that she was capable of doing, whether it was to change a cushion to a different color, or do something that would rearrange a cabinet, do something that would improve her house. Now, I also wanted to read to you, and the other one was to have tea, and I wanted to read to you out of Jane Austen. I've already spoken nearly 30 minutes and I haven't gotten to it yet. But another thing that I did when my oldest son came over was we started out with prayer. And first we talked about some of the challenges we were each having, and I think our whole family has some of the same problems. Is we'd like to be more organized so we can find things, and so that we could get up in the night and know where something was, and we would really like to be more mindful about that. And so we prayed about that God would give us the blessing of organization, plus free us up so that we could do something else, besides organize and clean. Free us up for other things. And we did an exercise for stress. Now, I wanted to talk to you about that because I noticed that you can dial up an exercise for everything. Here's what I wrote down that I found out. You can look up stretches for anxiety, and a page will come up with drawn illustrations of stretches that seem to relieve anxiety. Stretches for lethargy, stretches for upset stomach, stretches for pain, stretches for mind confusion. Anything you want, you can find. I learned a new one. And it was for this pain you get in your upper back sometimes as a homemaker, because you're leaning over a lot and you're doing things in over a cabinet, or everything seems to be from the front. And one of it is between your upper back and your lower back. I believe kind of between your shoulder blades, but maybe a little lower, but not completely lower back. And it was very interesting because they said on this site that I found that you're usually told not to round your shoulders and lean forward, but this was an exercise where you rounded your shoulders, you clasped your hands, and you leaned forward, and you could just feel the relief in that part of the back, and it was very effective. And a lot of these stretches, you only have to do them once, and you get some relief. So whatever it is that's bothering you, whether it's frustration or confusion, I'm sure you could find a stretch for it. So I want to go on to manners, and then I'm going to read from Jane Austen. And I might be here quite a while, but you can always stop and start again. Apparently on these videos they will stop on your device where you left off and start again. So I hope that you'll be able to do that. And I'd like to give some hints about being able to function in your home when it's so full of other people. And one of the things we did when I was growing up on the homestead, I'm the oldest of 7 children, and I noticed, as I got older, that everybody had to mind their own business. That was just kind of a family rule. And if you minded your own business, no one would be screaming or fussing about anything, and it would give our parents peace. So we were taught to mind our own business. Either get a book to read, find something to do, or do some work, and be peaceful. We had to have good manners in our peacefulness and also in our possessions. Take care of your own possessions. Don't break other people's possessions. Pick up after yourself. And for the younger children, help them if they need help. So also, as you grow older, I think it's important not to ask personal questions. This is something that still comes up, ladies, sometimes when ladies get together, sometimes, or they're just conversing, they start asking personal questions. And there was a book out in the 1980s by Judith Martin, and I believe it was called Miss Manners. I didn't keep it because it also had some things in it that I didn't think were wholesome. Manners and dealing with things that weren't really biblical. So I got rid of the book. But I remembered her saying in this book, when someone asked a personal question, how she suggested you look shocked and say, why on earth would you ask such a thing? Of course, now no one would take the hint, because if you ask them, why on earth would you ask such a thing, they would just look at you and say, well, I'm just asking. I want to know. But sometimes you have to tell people, that's a personal question, and I'm not going to answer it. That's personal. And there are questions like, what time do you go to bed at night? What time do you get up? And they seem real innocent. What size, whatever, do you wear? What, if it's personal, how often do you wash your hair? These things seem to be really innocent, and I suppose young girls would discuss it amongst themselves. But as you get older, those aren't considered really, they're considered just too personal. Like, who did you talk to today? Who was on the phone? If you're not, in the family. And it's hard because they catch you sometimes unawares. And I remember the last time someone asked me, what time does your husband get up in the morning? And I was just like, what? And I didn't quite know what to say because I had never been asked that before, but it's getting more bold. And so I just said, oh, it could be any time, various times. And of course, as we get more vital, we don't even have to get up, do we? We're just going to be up all night. That's what we're doing. So I wanted to discuss that a little bit with you and tell you about a little bit more about my son's visit, we decided that we would read from the Geneva Bible something and from the Tyndale Bible something, and it's very interesting how it comes across. These were English Bibles written before the KJV and other English Bibles. Very interesting because the pilgrims that came to America that were called separatists brought the Geneva Bible with them. And in Jamestown Colony, I understood they had the Geneva Bible. So anyway, we started out with prayer, and then he played the piano that we have here, and my oldest grandson was here, who's 24, and my son would play part of a tune, and the oldest grandson would guess the composer, and they were right, they knew all this stuff. And we practiced even breathing, and we tried a new tea, sang a new song, and then we talked about ancient history. And I was thinking, and we did an exercise, an anti-stress exercise. I just looked it up, anti-stress stretches. And I thought to myself, just as he was leaving, and I talked to him about this, I said, how much do you think someone would desire to have an hour like that? And where could you get it? We bypassed all the universities. We bypassed all the therapy groups. We bypassed the tea rooms. We bypassed all the classes, and we just did it ourselves. And so you can create this kind of atmosphere for yourself. And it's interesting, as I become more vital, how I realize that the descendants and the younger people want to tell me things and talk. So it's kind of sad in a way, because when I was the homeschool teacher and they were younger, I was telling them things. I thought it was pretty neat, the stuff I had discovered. Now I've taught them how to discover, and they want to tell me. So I do have a lot of things to talk about, and I brought way too many illustrations. But one of the paper bag deals I did was, how these bags have a top part that have this twisted paper here to make the handle. Well, I like to cut that off if we've used the rest of it, and I make another bag or something to do something with, and we can paint on them too. Let me see if I have everything. And I'm going to tell you something that I learned from Helen Andelin. Now, I know a lot of people objected to Helen Andelin and to her book, Fascinating Womanhood. There was a lot of classical stuff in it that I liked, though. And what I mean by classical is I mean timeless advice that was always there, that people of the time were using, and she included it in her book, so it wouldn't be necessarily written by her, but she did put it in her book. And one of the things that impressed me the most was, she said, the principle was, don't let other people's negativity and gloom rub off on you. That is so important, because if you're a mother at home, or even if you don't have children at home, you really need to keep your mind on the bright side so that you can keep the home running, to keep it going. If you get depressed by someone's depressing talk and their discouragement, you won't get the dishes done. You won't get your laundry caught up. Your place is just going to smell terrible. You won't be able to function. You won't get that dress sewn that you always wanted. You won't get that book read you wanted to read. You won't be able to go for your walk because your mind is going to be whirling with all this trouble. So what you have to do, she said, is sympathize with them, but keep your mind and your heart going, and don't let their gloom rub off on you. It's something you might want to think about, not to let other people's gloom rub off on you. Those of you who listen to any kind of media, you have to be careful with that. And your husband might come home and say, oh, this country is, whatever country you're in, the media always runs the country down in some way. This country is no good. We are all going to fail. We are all going to this and that and the other thing. And it can be quite scary if you're a young person and you are at home and your husband comes home because he's been listening to the radio on the way home. And now he he doesn't have any confidence that he's going to be able to go on with a happy life. Everything's going to be gloom, and everything's going to be depressing. You have to be careful that you don't let anyone's gloom rub off on you, especially if you have children, and especially if you have a husband, because you're going to be the one that lights the home. You're going to be the one that keeps that stability, that feeling of stability at home. You have a powerful responsibility. I would like to talk more about that. It's something you might have to discover for yourself. But you don't help by saying, oh, come on now, let's be cheerful. Because when someone's gloomy, you don't want to sing a cheerful song to them. That's a big mistake. You just say, I understand how you might feel. I understand why you feel that way. And it's true. Things must be pretty bad. Well, let's have supper now. Let's have a cup of tea. Like Austen would say, I see the tea is ready. Let us go and have some. So I'm going to read to you now a chapter on tea. And ladies, if these lessons are too long, you just click it off and then pick it up the next day. This one might be a little bit longer. I hope I didn't shock you too much by coming back. I almost forgot how to speak. So I'm probably going to slur and stumble over all the words in Brian Kozlowski's book, The Jane Austen Diet. I am telling you, this was quite the book. But it didn't have the meaning to me as it could have had. When I first read it, my mind tended to water. But I started to read it aloud to you and to friends on the phone. The book came alive for me. I just think reading aloud is so good for you. And even if you live alone, do all those things that I suggested. I'll try to make a list of all these things this lady tried to do for herself. But she said she got herself up out of a very dark period in her life doing these little things. Oh, and another thing she would do is do one mending thing a day. Sew on a button, repair a hem, and she would sort one box of something a day, or one drawer in the kitchen, or just one thing. And she said gradually she could feel all the little chips in her mind falling into the right places. And she developed a stronger motivation. So let's go to... I had read the mind-body connection, My Poor Nerves, and I do want to read that again. That is so good. But we're going to do tea, all right? And hopefully you can get something done. Maybe feel okay. Try to limit the amount of bad news and stress and thoughts of gloomy things. Try to limit that to so many minutes a day. You say, well, I'm going to think about this maybe for a couple of minutes, and then you have to get up and do something. I'm sure that many people are enduring such horror in their lives and such terror in their lives that they cannot put it aside. We will try to help by reading, and you can listen while you work today, okay? So this is from the chapter Drinks with Jane. And my friend that lives here off and on because her husband's work takes him here sometimes, and then she goes back to another state, and she comes over in the morning when they're here, and she says, when can we start drinking? She says, she's talking about tea, and she says, I have a drinking problem. Every time I think of something that makes me want to panic, I want a teacup, and I want to come over and drink. So, here's the title of the subtitle of Drinks with Jane. But indeed, I would rather have nothing but tea. Let's start with the go-to beverage, the drink all heroines should prefer to anything. Find the words drink or drinking in a Jane Austen sentence, and you're almost guaranteed to find a nice cup of tea at the end of it. Apparently, you can do a word search, like a concordance type of thing, like you would in the Bible, and find words in the Jane Austen novels where they're located. Emma alone has 15 tea references. Mansfield Park has 8. Coffee? Nah. Cocoa? Nope. I'm much obliged to you, but I prefer tea. That's a quote from one of the books. It all seems rather quaint and cutesy to us. Ah, tea with Jane Austen. Warm fuzzies emanate from the very phrase. But there's more to Jane's offer of tea than a few crocheted doilies and pinky-up fingers. In fact, Austen's promotion of tea was practically edgy by Regency health standards. A relatively new and exotic leaf from far-flung China, leaf pronounced with a knowing wink and a nudge, tea was still regarded as something of a novelty drug to the English. Now, these days, what they're calling tea might not actually be tea, but we call it tea. It's like my little 5-year-old grandson making this bag of tea, and it's cinnamon and ginger, and that's all. And we drank it. You can just make tea out of anything. Its side effects were mild but confusing. Tea seemed able to simultaneously pep people up and then calm them down. No one knew quite what to make of it. Apothecary shops, the pharmacies of the day, were still selling tea as a type of medicine, adding to its mystique and sparking a national debate over the health or harm of this herbal potation. While some thought it perfectly safe to sip salubrious tea, many doctors had serious concerns. The teapots full of warm water I see upon their tables put me in a mind of Pandora's box, from whence all sorts of evil issue forth, wrote the physician Samuel Tissot in 1768, less than a decade before Austen's birth. As the debate continued, as Jane attempted her novel, Sanditon. Now remember, Sanditon was supposed to be about a health resort on the beach where people who needed to lose weight or who just were in poor health, who coughed a lot, etc., could get the good sea air and the sand and the exercise and the rest that they needed to get well naturally. In Sanditon, now of course I haven't seen the new Sanditon, I'm not really keen on it. Unfortunately, some of the modern ones done after 1998 just a little too risque for me. But Sanditon is copyright free. If you want to rewrite it or add the ending to it, whatever, you can. In it, a character named Arthur Parker believes that drinking tea is tantamount to a trippy drug experience. This is why sometimes I have to edit out some of the phrases in Linda Lichter's book, Simple Social Graces, and in Brian Kozlowski's book, the Jane Austen Diet, because they get kind of spicy, and it's not really like something I would want to read aloud to little children. And but anyway, these are his expressions. It acts on me like poison and would entirely take away the use of my right side before I had swallowed it 5 minutes. It has happened to me so often I cannot doubt it. The use of my right side is entirely taken away for several hours. Given the fact that Mr. Parker is the biggest buffoon in the novel, it's obvious which side of the tea debate Austen was on. That's interesting, that whenever a certain faction of society hates something, sometimes you realize they hate it because there's something really good about it. Though despite having no way of scientifically knowing if this exotic brew was healthy or not, and I have to realize they were probably using tea leaves from that, the camellia plant in China, whereas we use all kinds of other things that have no caffeine in them. And I will bring a tea next time that I've learned to like. We try to learn from each other, my kids and I, my daughter and I, my grandchildren and I, and so they introduced me to a new tea brand, and I'd like to bring it next time and talk to you about it. Jane spoke up for tea with the tree-stumping passion of a Lorax. Even today there are few greater tributes to tea drinking than those found in Jane's novel. "Perhaps you would like some tea." That's a quote from one of the novels. Every smart heroine confidently answers yes. Wouldn't it be nice, that every time you saw someone they would say, "Oh, come for tea," or "Can I come to your house for tea?" In Sanditon, the heroine even makes a bold prediction that one day it will be the simplest thing in the world to prove the effect tea has on the body by those who have studied tea scientifically and thoroughly enough to understand all the possibilities of their action on each other. Meanwhile, Austen reminds her characters to drink up. You must drink tea. It is the closest Jane gets to issuing a dietary command. Turns out she was brilliantly correct. In quest of tea. Tea now solidly ranks as one of the healthiest drinks on the planet. Thanks to decades of modern research by those who have studied tea scientifically and thousands of years of human observation, it was already China's national beverage in 350 AD. Tea is now the easiest, cheapest, safest, and most potent super drink in your dieting arsenal. Important clarification. I am just talking about regular tea, the dried leaves of the Camellia sinensis shrub, the tea plant steeped in boiling water. The same tea the herbalists of ancient China recognized as the elixir of life. The same tea Austen eagerly purchased from Twinings in 1814 and pours out so frequently in her novels. Now, if you remember, you didn't live back then, but if those of you who know history and kind of studied tea, the tea was packed in a block. The tea itself was a block, and you cut off a piece of it, the leaves. They just squashed it all together in a block, and it dried in a block. I find that fascinating. I actually haven't found anything like that, but I'm going to go to a tea store tomorrow and look and see if they have anything like that. The same tea steaming in pots around the world, be it black, green, white, or Earl Grey. The only difference? We now better understand why everyone should be, as Jane says, in serious quest of tea. Refresh. There's an insightful line in Mansfield Park that hints at the first miracle of tea. Fanny quenches her thirst with a little tea, and it soon refreshed her body. Well, of course, if you're under stress, any time you sit down and drink a hot beverage and take your time and think while you're drinking. And the beauty of drinking something hot is you're not going to gulp it down the way you would a real cold drink. And you have to stop and you have to think a little bit. And you have to just be still. And those moments of being still, that was one of the things this lady had written on her list of things to do when she got under a terrible amount of anxiety. She just wrote down, sit down, drink a cup of tea, and, don't think about anything, just drink the tea. And it has done more healthful things for her. So it would do us all good to make a list like that of some half-minute or 1-minute things to do and see if we can keep it up for, a certain amount of days, check it off the list, and see, kind of be your own scientist and observe to see what the effect is on you, what the effect is on your home and on your thinking and generally on your will to live and to love life. Refresh. There's an insightful line in Mansfield Park that hints at the first miracle of tea. Fanny quenches her thirst with a little tea and soon refreshed her body. Science can now confirm that tea literally does just that, refreshing our bodies on a cellular level. Tea contains an abundant source of polyphenols, powerful antioxidants. Polyphenols are nature's protective chemicals, a cocktail of defense compounds helping plants stay strong by warding off unwanted pests and diseases. Polyphenols do practically the same thing in our bodies whenever we eat or drink them, boosting our ability to fight cell damage in our organs, particularly the heart. Tea packs quite a polyphenol punch. There are just as many cell-protecting polyphenols in a large mug of tea as in a standard glass of red wine, which could explain another cultural phenomenon. Countries with the highest green tea consumption, such as Japan, have some of the lowest rates of cancer and cardiovascular disease, not to mention equally low obesity rates, another likely power punch from polyphenols. According to research from the University of California, the polyphenols in tea can aid weight loss by acting like prebiotics, encouraging the growth of metabolism-boosting bacteria in our gut. Essentially, tea can help us burn fat without us getting off our bums. Not entirely recommended, but certainly a recognized benefit of tea even back in the 18th century. You see why I can't really read some of these books aloud. The proper use of tea, wrote Samuel Johnson in 1757. There's another interesting character, Samuel Johnson, Boswell's Life of Johnson. This is something my son and I are going to. You can actually get the book online and just read it off of your phone, which I'm going to try to do. But I ordered a written copy of it because my son and I are going to talk about Samuel Johnson. Wrote Samuel Johnson in 1715, said he wrote the first English dictionary. Is the proper use of tea, he said, is to dilute the full meals of those who cannot exercise. Accordingly, those who cannot use exercise in Austen world cannot seem to live without tea either. The elderly Mrs. Bates, for instance, was a very old lady, almost past everything but tea. Soothe. Tea is the cup that cheers, according to William Cowper, a favorite poet of Austen's, and obviously one of her favorite beliefs about tea. In almost all her novels, tea is a liquid mood booster, magically bringing comfort and content with every sip. Comfort and content with every sip. It's the first thing that soothes Catherine's jaded spirits after her nightmare at Northanger Abbey, and tea is there to calm Fanny's head and heart following her emotional journey from Mansfield Park. All very accurate observations. Tea is nootropic. It literally enhances the way we think. It does this through a special amino acid called L-theanine, one of the few plants in the world with this unique compound. L-theanine relieves tension and anxiety by stimulating alpha wave patterns in our brains, the brain waves that make us feel both relaxed and mentally focused. Now, I have found out through these stretch exercises that I find that after a minute or two, I get that feeling of in my brain of balance and contentment and almost euphoric happiness of this good feeling. And that's why I say, even if you are sitting in a chair, you can find chair exercises you can even find exercises for grief. You can find exercises for shock. You can find exercises for loss, for many other things. I was surprised at how many came up. I wish they had one for poverty. But, we could make up one. We could call it poverty exercises, start a new thing here. Anything's possible. So they say the brain waves that make us feel both relaxed and mentally focused. I get that just from a minute or two of a chair exercise. In 2004, now he mentions the same patterns stimulated during meditation. The Bible talks a lot about meditating, and of course meditating on God's Word. And that just means to mull over it and to think about it word by word over and over. And it does a great deal of good. There used to be exercises you could find. It was back in the olden days, when we had VHS tapes and you stick them in, and ladies would do programs where they would read the Bible, or they would have a Christian song in the background while you did exercises. Well, you can still do that. You know, you can find one that's all drawn out and scroll up and look at them, and you can play the scripture texts in the background on a different device, so, or on the same device too sometimes. In 2004, L-theanine was even found to be more effective at reducing anxiety during relaxation than the modern sedative Xanax, confirming the wisdom of ancient Chinese poem, "Tea banishes my loneliness and melancholy." It's also the movement, you know. You're pouring it and you're smelling the top notes and you see the steam coming out of it. And I even encourage my ladies when they come over and they want to have tea, I'll pick out a flavor and I'll say, now don't just sip it. Run it under your nose first and smell it. We are so very sophisticated. And they get a big kick out of that, and they can smell it. And then they taste it, because that gets your taste buds ready. And I have been studying about the saliva glands and how to keep them going and how important they are for your digestion and for your teeth. And we'll talk about that maybe in another video. I want to finish this chapter, though, because I'm running to the end and I've been here an hour. And just remember, you can stop it whenever you want and go to my blog, where I have placed a link under the video on YouTube. I placed a link there where you can go to my blog to see what else is on the post that goes with what I'm talking about or what I've presented. Austen's England was full of similar findings. And what I like about Austen is just the little things in life. She didn't have to go see anything great, and she didn't have to do anything great. She was like us in the fact that we can make something beautiful out of our home. Even if we have the ceremony of tea, it lifts us up. It lifts our home up to something just as important as royalty in a castle. Is when you have tea. That's something we all have. Their tea is not any better than ours. Austen, England was full of similar findings. In 1763, James Boswell found tea to be a most kind remedy whenever he felt depressed, low-spirited, dull, and miserable. Let's have tea. Whenever there is, remember I talked about not letting other people's gloom rub off on you. Just, sympathize, and the best sympathy you can give people is say, it must be hard. And then say, well, let's have tea. And then it does help, because it's like handing a needed empathetic gesture to someone who's just dying, is to offer them a cup of tea. Whenever he felt depressed, low-spirited, dull, and miserable, it was a most kind remedy. Fresh from the trauma of fighting at Waterloo, Captain John Kincaid relied on tea as the most sovereign restorative of jaded spirits. 3 centuries later, most modern Brits would still agree. There's seemingly no trauma in England that can't be made infinitely better by a nice cup of tea. You could make yourself a little sign for your refrigerator, or with a piece of brown paper, keep the handle on, and then you can hang it up somewhere in your house. And you could make it tailor-made for your own self, where he says there is seemingly no trauma in England that can't be made infinitely better by a nice cup of tea. You could either put that quote in, or you could just put, there's no trauma in this family or this house, or there's no trauma in the world that can't be made infinitely better by a nice cup of tea. And I think they should beat their plowshares into teacups, don't you? Instead of swords. Or beat their swords into plowshares. They should beat their swords into teacups. And that's quoting from someplace in the Bible. So 3 centuries later, most modern Brits would still agree. There's seemingly no trauma in England that can't be made infinitely better by a nice cup of tea. Okay, kids, you can even say England if you want to. You can say whatever you want to. You can say France. What was that quote about France that was so funny? It was similar to this one here. It's the national reaction for bad breakups, scraped knees, and general life stress. Right then, I'll put the kettle on. This was spectacularly demonstrated during the London bombings in 2005, when local shopkeepers rushed to the shocked, dazed, and wounded with what else? Bracing cups of tea. A very British response to terror, said the New York Times, but it was Austen's exact response, too. After the stress of Marianne's near-death experience, Eleanor seeks immediate solace in a nice cup of tea, leaving Marianne sweetly asleep. Before tea, it was a rather dull affair, but then after tea, we cheered up. So I will read the rest of that to you later. And ladies, if this has done you good, I hope you will leave a thumbs up. And also, if could go to my blog and leave a comment if you like. I don't have comments on, and I don't think I have thumbs up either, but you can leave something like that on the blog because that's where I'm going to embed the video. And thank you so much for those who are helping me out. I noticed that even a small amount of a donation will buy me these little extras that I need to make life, even buy me a box of tea, and makes life extremely pleasurable and happy. And I noticed even and I wanted to show you my teacup because it goes with this dress that I made. Actually, I made this for my daughter, and when she came, we traded off a bunch of dresses and things we didn't want anymore. I had made this for her, but it goes with this teacup so nicely. These teacups are about $6.90 and sometimes less at Home Goods and Marshall's and Ross and TJ Maxx. And that's even cheaper. These teacups are even cheaper sometimes than a box of good tea. So, and it's nice to treat yourself to one once in a while. That's part of your self-care. So, ladies, I hope that you will stay close to Christ. Read something from the good book today and dwell on it and do some things that they call it self-care, but really it is, you have to keep yourself focused and keep yourself healthy mentally and physically. So I hope you'll have a cup of tea, and I hope that you will do well today, and make sure in your prayers you ask God to help you get the things accomplished you need to accomplish, and to bless every member of your family, because your home and your family, that is the most important ministry there is. So I'll talk to you later. I love you. Bye.